The message arrived on a Tuesday. Dara Vasquez read it twice. Then she set her coffee down very carefully, the way you set something down when your hands are not entirely reliable, and she read it a third time. It was not long. The translation algorithm had rendered it in clean, flat English, which somehow made it worse. 41 lines. No greeting. No signature. Just terms laid out the way you lay out a bill someone already owes you. The Vouth Consensus, representing 9 sovereign species across 4 galactic sectors, hereby delivers formal notice of planetary integration to the body known as Earth. Compliance is expected within 30 rotations. Non-compliance will result in accelerated integration. The distinction between the two outcomes, the document implied, was mostly a matter of comfort. Livestock arrangement. The algorithm had added in brackets as a translator's note, best available equivalent. Dara stared at the brackets for a long time. Outside the glass wall of the briefing room, the United Nations translation corridor had turned into something between a fire drill and a prayer meeting. Ambassador Lelayer from France was sitting in a chair with his head between his knees. 2 junior staffers were crying in a very professional way, meaning they were doing it quietly and near a window. Someone had turned on the emergency lighting by mistake and no one had turned it off, so everything had the particular color of a situation that had already gone wrong. Dara pulled up the Vouth recorded engagement history on her tablet. 214 civilizations. 214 notices delivered. 214 accepted outcomes. All of them the same. She scrolled slowly. No recorded refusals. No recorded resistance of any organized kind. A few individual incidents flagged as low-level disruption, resolved quickly. The Vouth had not fought a real war in 600 years. They did not need to. The math of their arrival had always been enough. You looked at the numbers and you folded. Every civilization, every time. The math was objectively very bad for Earth. Dara closed the engagement history and opened the structural breakdown of the Vouth Consensus instead. 9 species, 1 dominant. 8 junior partners who received resource allocations scaled so generously against 0 that the Vouth core had apparently never questioned whether the arrangement would hold forever. She tilted her head slightly. Then she opened a new memo, flagged it routine priority, not even urgent, and addressed it to the Joint Chiefs, the European Space Agency, and a woman named Ia Koffer at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, who owed her a favor from a conference in Geneva, where Dara had covered for her during a security briefing no one was supposed to know he had missed. The subject line read, Opportunity Assessment. She sent it, picked up her coffee. It had gone cold.
She drank it anyway.
In the main chamber, the Secretary General was at the podium now, reading the official statement that had been drafted in the 40 minutes since the message came through.
His voice was steady.
His hands, Dara noticed, were not. The statement acknowledged receipt of the communication, expressed the commitment of Earth's unified governing bodies to careful deliberation, and respectfully requested 30 days for formal internal consultation. It was a good statement.
Dignified.
Measured. The kind of language that bought time without burning anything. The Vouth observer, Preth Salon, watched from the elevated gallery. His species had 4 upper limbs, a jawline architecture that registered as vaguely regal in most human observers, and antennae that curled slightly at the tips when he was relaxed. They were curled now. His cultural attaché had briefed Dara's team that this particular posture was the Vouth equivalent of a man leaning back in a chair after a meal that had gone exactly as expected. He would file his report within the hour. Dara knew what it would say, without reading it. Expected distress signatures. Recommend standard occupation framework. 30 days granted. They always granted the 30 days. She watched him watch the Secretary General. She thought about the 8 junior species in the consensus, about the resource allocations, about 600 years of civilizations who had looked at the math and in folding had never needed to ask each other what they might have done instead. 2 things were true simultaneously, and Dara held them both the way you hold a problem you are already solving, even though you have not announced that you are solving it. The first was that the math was genuinely terrible. The Vouth were not bluffing. The technical capacity implied by their arrival alone, the communication precision, the translation infrastructure, The sheer administrative confidence of a 41-line document that expected to end a civilization's sovereignty and had formatted itself accordingly. All of it pointed to a force that Earth could not match in any direct contest. The second was that they had sent the message on a Tuesday via a communication channel that Yi's team would shortly determine had not been updated in security architecture since before humans had working satellites, to a species they had assessed as non-spacefaring and therefore not worth the effort of a proper threat evaluation. They had not sent a fleet. They had sent paperwork. Dara had spent 11 years in military logistics before moving to the diplomatic corps. She understood at a cellular level the difference between those two things. A fleet said we are prepared for resistance. Paperwork said we have not considered it. That was not a gap in their power. That was a gap in their imagination. Outside, the corridor was calmer now. The emergency lighting had been turned off. Ambassador Lelaire had recovered sufficiently to be on a call, gesturing in the controlled way of a man who was frightened and trying not to show it to whoever was on the other end. The two staffers had stopped crying and were distributing printed copies of the statement with the slightly over-focused confidence of people who needed a task.
Dara picked up her tablet.
She opened the memo she'd sent to the Joint Chiefs and added one line. It read, "Check the communication frequency on the notice. Do not discuss by phone." Then she went to find better coffee. Because if the next 30 days were going to go the way she thought they were, she was going to need it. And the stuff in the briefing room machine was genuinely not worth the situation it was being asked to support. Preth Salon's report filed that evening recommended a minimal ground presence for the eventual integration. He noted the absence of any known interstellar military capacity. He noted the distress signatures, the weeping staffers, the physical posture of the human leader as he read the statement, the general atmosphere of a species encountering its ceiling for the first time and finding the ceiling very low. He noted one anomaly in the behavioral data. A female officer in the lower gallery, mid-ranking insignia, dark hair, tablet in hand, who had been observed smiling slightly at some point during the reading of the official statement. He marked it as a data artifact. Smile registered wrong, he wrote. Grief presents differently across species. Likely cultural variant of distress expression. He submitted the report.
He went to sleep.
On a different floor of the same building, Dara Vasquez was on the phone with Ia Koffer, speaking quietly, not from secrecy, she would say later if anyone asked, but because the idea was still small and she did not want to make it feel crowded. Okay, so, she said. Who had known Dara for 12 years and understood what that phrase meant when followed by a pause, said, "How bad is it?" "It's not bad at all," Dara said. "That's the thing. Someone left a door unlocked and handed us a deadline. I just need you to tell me if the frequency is as old as I think it is. And if it is." She looked at the window. The city outside was dark and ordinary in the particular way cities are when no one in them has been told yet. "Then it's a gift," she said. "We just need to figure out what to do with it before the 30 days run out." She hung up. She opened the file on the 8 junior species in the Vouth consensus. She started reading. The frequency was exactly as old as she thought. He called back 14 hours later, and Dara heard it in the first half-second of silence before he spoke, the particular quality of a silence that meant you were right, and it is worse than you said, and also I might be a little annoyed at how right you were. Pre-satellite era, he said. The encryption architecture is from before we had GPS. We cracked comparable systems in 1987. How long to get full access to the transmission network? For a read? 18 hours. For a write? A pause. Dara, if we can write to that network. I know. Dara's voice was quiet. That's not a communication channel anymore. That's a master key. If they figure out what we're doing.
They won't, Dara said.
Because it won't look like anything. It'll look like administrative traffic. They've been running this system for 600 years without anyone pushing back on it. Their security is built on the assumption that no one would bother. We're going to bother. Another silence. Longer this time. Okay, he said. 18 hours for the read. I'll need 4 more people, and I need them cleared at a level that doesn't officially exist. You'll have them by tonight. What do you need from me first? Dara looked at the list she had been building since 3 in the morning. 12 civilizations currently within their own 30-day windows. 12 species who had received the same 41 lines, the same brackets, the same implied math of a thing already decided. I need the communication logs, she said. Every notice the Vouth has sent in the last 5 years. Every recipient species. Every current status. That's a long list. It gets shorter, Dara said. We only need the ones who are still in their window. There were 12. She had suspected 8. 12 was better. The work that followed was not dramatic in any visible way. It did not look like the beginning of something. It looked like what it technically was, a mid-level diplomatic officer working long hours on a complex multi-party consultation framework. Her badge got her into rooms. Her clearance got her into other rooms. The fact that she had spent 11 years making herself useful to people in ways that left no fingerprints got her into the rest. The Joint Chiefs read her memo and called her in on day 3. General Alan Proctor, who had the manner of a man who had been skeptical of things professionally for 40 years and was not about to stop, put her memo on the table between them and said, "This says opportunity assessment. It does not say what the opportunity is." I didn't know yet when I sent it, Dara said. I know now. She laid out what she had. The communication frequency. The 12 active windows. The 8 junior species. The resource allocation breakdown that showed clearly that the Vouth Core kept 70% of everything and distributed the remaining 30 across 8 partners in proportions that said you are here because leaving would be complicated, not because you are valued. Proctor listened. His expression did not change. This was not unusual. His expression did not change when things were bad, and it did not change when things were good, and Dara had learned to read the quality of his stillness instead. Right now, his stillness had the quality of a man doing very fast arithmetic. You want to contact 12 alien civilizations, he said. Species we've never spoken to. Species who are currently scared and isolated and sitting in 30-day windows believing they're alone in this. Yes. And do what? Offer them something better than what they have. Proctor looked at her for a moment. That's not a plan. That's a sentence. The plan is 60 pages, Dara said. I can walk you through it. But the sentence is the part that matters, because the sentence is what every single one of those 12 species is going to hear first. And if the sentence isn't right, the 60 pages don't get read. He looked at the memo again. She waited. How are you planning to reach them without the Vouth knowing? Dara allowed herself the smallest possible version of a smile. Through their own network. Formatted to look like standard resource amendment traffic, which the Vouth Core does not review manually because in 600 years, no one has ever sent them a resource amendment they didn't write themselves. The silence in the room was the particular silence of something tilting. What do you need? Proctor said finally. Authorization, cover, and Iacoffer's team to keep doing what they're already doing. He nodded once, not enthusiastically, the way you nod when you are not yet willing to call something a good idea, but you are willing to acknowledge that it is the only idea. 30 days, he said. 26 now. He nodded again. Don't waste them. Dara left the building and sat in her car for 4 minutes. Not because she was overwhelmed. She was not particularly overwhelmed. She sat because she had learned a long time ago in a context she did not discuss that there was a specific kind of tiredness that came not from the work but from the weight of being the person who saw the door before anyone else did. The only cure for it was 4 minutes alone before you walk through it. She drove back to the office. The first contact message went out that evening, routed through the Vouth transmission network, formatted as a routine resource data request, addressed to the 12 species currently sitting in their own silence, believing no one was coming. It was not a long message. It said, "You are not alone in this. We have a proposal. Please respond through this channel and do not mention this communication to the Vouth." Then it said, "We are the species from the 3rd planet of a minor star system in a sector you probably do not have a name for yet." Then it said, "We got the same letter you did." Then it said, "We think it is a door." 12 civilizations read that last line. 11 of them did not understand it yet. One of them, a silicon-based species called the Theresi, who had been under Vouth pressure for 200 years and were tired in a way that had settled into their architecture, like sediment, wrote back in 4 words. What is behind it? Dara read the response at 2 in the morning. Alone in the comms room with cold coffee and Yi's voice still faintly audible from the next room where her team was running frequency maintenance. She typed back immediately. Something better than what you have. The Theresai took 11 minutes to respond. Then we're listening. Dara set the coffee down. Okay, so, she thought. Here we go. The Munraks responded differently. They did not respond with words. Their first message, received on day 8, was a data packet that Yi's team spent 6 hours decoding. When the decoding was complete, it turned out to be a detailed inventory of every weapon system the Munraks had developed, categorized by yield, range, and current operational status. Dara read the inventory for a long time. Is this a threat? One of Yi's analysts asked. Is this a threat? One of Yi's analysts asked. No, Dara said. It's an introduction. They're telling us who they are before they decide if we're worth talking to. She spent an hour drafting Earth's response. When she was done, it was also a weapons inventory. Every publicly acknowledged system, plus 3 things that had never been publicly acknowledged, added not to impress, but to signal, we are also telling you who we are.
She sent it.
The Munraks took 4 hours. Then they sent 2 words in translated flat English through the Vautha's own network.
Continue speaking.
The Theresai, meanwhile, had become something she had not expected.
Easy.
Not cooperative in a strategic way. Easy in the way of something that has been waiting a very long time for a conversation it had stopped believing would come. They asked questions with the patience of a species that had learned to pace itself across centuries. And they answered hers with a directness that made the 12-hour time delay between their star and Earth feel almost irrelevant. On day 11, the Theresai sent her the Vautha's internal administrative structure. Not the public-facing one, the actual one. 200 years of being adjacent to power, and they had been watching and recording and storing. The way you store things when you do not yet know what you will need them for, but you know the day will come.
Dara sat with that file for a long time.
She thought about 200 years. She thought about patience she did not have a unit of measurement for. She closed the file carefully, the way you close something that deserves to be closed carefully, and added it to the architecture of the proposal that was now 48 pages and growing. The Pell were the hardest. Small, bioluminescent, deeply faithful. They had received the Vouth notice, and in the quiet days after had arrived collectively at the conclusion that it was a form of cosmic judgment. Their theologians had issued formal guidance. Their population was calm, not the calm of people who had given up, but the calm of people who had decided what the situation meant and found the meaning sufficient. Dara spent 6 days on them. She did not argue theology. She had learned in a different life that you do not argue the frame. You change what is in it. She sent the Pell the Vouth tax records.
Not all of them.
The specific subset that documented what happened to the spiritual sites, the sacred spaces, the ceremonially significant territories of the 214 species who had accepted integration. Documented with Vouth administrative precision because the Vouth had categorized those spaces under resource classification. Because to the Vouth, the distinction between a temple and a mineral deposit was a matter of what you could extract from it. The Pell read the records. They did not respond for 2 days. When they responded, they did not address the theology directly. They asked one question. What do you need from us? Dara breathed out slowly. By day 18, she had formal preliminary agreements with 11 of the 12 species. The 12th, a methane atmosphere civilization called the Vesser, had not responded at all. Not a refusal. Not a request for more time. Just silence, which Yi's team eventually determined was because the Vesser communication system operated on a frequency band that the Vouth network did not carry cleanly, and the message had arrived garbled. Dara sent it again corrected. The Vesser responded within an hour. We have been waiting for someone to contact us for 30 years. We assumed no one would. What took you so long? Dara stared at that message for a moment. Then she wrote back. We only just got the letter. The proposal in its final form was 62 pages. It was formatted, at Yi's insistence and with genuine craft, to appear within Vouth administrative systems as a standard resource sharing amendment request. The kind of document that the Vouth legal team would receive as a matter of routine processing and begin reading without any particular alertness, because in 600 years, no one had ever sent them a resource amendment they needed to be alert about. The document's first 4 pages were genuinely administrative.
Dry.
Precise. The kind of language that made legal teams comfortable and slightly inattentive. Page 4 contained a clause that, in VALF administrative law, constituted a binding mutual defense framework between co-signatories. There were 13 co-signatories. All 13 were species currently under active VALF subjugation notices. And running through the remaining 58 pages, rooted through the legitimate administrative language like a second river under a visible one, was the actual offer. Not to the VALF. To the 8 junior species in the consensus, who would receive the same document simultaneously through the same network, formatted as a routine copy notice. The offer was simple. It said, there is another arrangement available. One where your allocation is not 30% of someone else's decision. One where your people's name appears first on the document instead of after. You have never been asked if you wanted this. We are asking. On day 24, Dara went over the final document with the full team. It was late. The room smelled like the specific combination of cold takeaway food and too many hours that meant people had been in it continuously for longer than was reasonable. She read the whole thing start to finish, one more time. Then she looked at the room.
We're ready, she said.
No one cheered. This was not that kind of room. But a particular quality of silence settled, the kind that meant yes, and we know what this costs, and we are doing it anyway. He caught Dara's eye from across the table. She did not ask if Dara was okay. She had known her long enough to know that the question in this moment would not land correctly. Instead, she made the specific face that meant I see you, which was enough. Dara looked at the wall for a second. Then she looked back at the document. 2 days to the deadline. The proposal was ready. She sent the distribution confirmation to all 13 co-signatories. 12 civilizations scattered across 4 sectors all received the same message in the same moment. It said, deliver this on deadline day simultaneously. Do not deviate from the format. Do not announce it in advance. Let it arrive as paperwork. The most dangerous thing they were about to do was going to look from the outside like filing. Dara found something in that deeply satisfying. She went home for the first time in 3 days. She slept 4 hours. She came back. The deadline was tomorrow. Deadline day arrived the way significant days often do, without any visible sign that it was different from any other. The chamber where Earth's formal response was to be delivered had been arranged with care. The right flags, the right seating configuration. The VALF diplomatic team had sent a full delegation, which was itself a mild departure from standard procedure. Normally, the consensus sent 2 observers to record the capitulation. They had sent 7. Dara noticed this from her position at the back of the observer gallery. She filed it under. They are expecting theater. They want witnesses for the part where we fold. The Secretary General, Colin Fairbanks, walked to the podium. He was not nervous. Dara had spoken to him the night before. She had walked him through the document and the plan and what the next few hours would most likely look like. He had asked 3 precise questions, listened to the 3 precise answers, and then said, all right, in the tone of a man who had decided he was the right person for this moment, not because he was fearless, but because his fear had apparently decided to stay in its lane and not interfere with his function. He began reading. The official response was measured, respectful, formally composed in VALF diplomatic register, which had no grammatical mode for refusal. It had only modes for submission, negotiation within submission, and ceremonial submission. The language team had spent 4 days threading the proposal through the negotiation within submission mode, and they had done it with precision. The response said yes. Earth acknowledged the terms. It said Earth was prepared to proceed with integration discussions. It said Earth had prepared a resource-sharing amendment for the consensus's consideration, which it submitted herewith, co-signed by 13 interested parties for review under standard administrative protocol. Then Colin Fairbanks set the document on the table. 62 pages. A VALF legal aid collected it with the particular automated efficiency of someone performing a task they expected to take 20 minutes and then discard. Preth Salon in the gallery above had his antennae curled, comfortable. He had his report half-drafted already. Capitulation accepted. Integration to proceed. Minimal incident. The legal aid opened the document. Dara watched the aid read. Pages 1 through 3. The aide's posture did not change. Page 4. The aide stopped. Not visibly, not dramatically. A small stop, the kind that looked from a distance like a person rereading a line to confirm they had read it correctly the first time. Dara knew exactly which clause it was. The aide turned to the senior Vouth legal counsel at the table. Spoke quietly. The senior counsel took the document. Read page 4. Turn to page 5. Read. Kept reading. Across 4 galactic sectors, in the same moment, 11 other delegations were placing 62 identical pages on 11 other tables. The 8 junior species in the Vouth consensus were receiving their copy notices. The junior species representatives were reading. Dara watched Preth Salon's antennae. They were no longer curled. The Vouth Senior Council reached page 31 and stopped completely. Set the document down. Said something to the lead delegate in a tone that Dara's lip-reading skills were not strong enough to parse, but whose emotional register she could identify from 30 meters away. The same register she had heard in rooms before, in contexts she did not visit in her memory, if she could avoid it. The register of a person who has just realized the room they are in is not the room they thought they were in. The lead Vouth delegate stood. Addressed Colin Fairbanks directly. The translation came through Dara's earpiece 4 seconds later. This document contains unauthorized coalition language. This is outside accepted response parameters. Colin Fairbanks said politely. The document was submitted under standard administrative protocol. As stated, Earth would be happy to discuss any specific clauses the consensus wishes to review. The co-signatories listed on this document are species currently under active integration notices. They do not have standing to co-sign coalition agreements. The document has been reviewed by Earth's legal team and the legal teams of all 13 co-signatories. If the consensus has a specific procedural objection, Earth is prepared to receive it in writing. The word writing landed in the room with a quietness that was almost funny. The Vouth delegation conferred. Preth Salon was on a communication device. His antennae were doing something Dara had no reference for. Across the chamber, she caught Colin's eye for 1 second. He gave her nothing, just held her gaze for a moment, the way a person holds the gaze of someone they trust when trust is the main thing keeping the moment together. Her earpiece crackled. Yi's voice very quiet. 3 of the 8 junior species have filed independent response documents in the last 40 minutes. Not with us, with the Vouth Corps, requesting renegotiation of their own resource terms. Dara did not move. Independent of us? Completely. They didn't coordinate with us. They just read the offer and acted on their own. Dara breathed slowly. This was the part she had hoped for but had not built into the plan, because you could not build hope into a plan. You could only build structure and leave room for things to go better than expected. 3 species. After 200 years of accepting an arrangement that gave them 30% and a seat at someone else's table, they had looked at the offer in the document and done the arithmetic themselves. They had not needed to be convinced. They had needed to be shown that the arithmetic was possible. What's the Vouth Corps' response? They haven't responded yet. I think they're still reading. The Vouth lead delegate in the chamber was on a communication device now as well. The room had gone very still. Colin Fairbanks stood at the podium with his hands flat on the surface, not gripping, just resting. The posture of a man who had decided to take up exactly as much space as he needed and not 1 centimeter more. Dara looked at the document on the table. 62 pages. 600 years of unopened doors. She felt something she did not immediately name, and she was careful not to name it because naming it would make it into a thing she had to manage, and right now she needed her hands free. The Vouth lead delegate finished his communication, turned back to the room, looked at Colin Fairbanks, said through the translation system in a voice that had lost the quality it had arrived with. Earth is to consider this session suspended pending consensus review. Colin Fairbanks said, Of course. Earth appreciates the consensus taking the time to review the document thoroughly. The Vouth delegation left the chamber. The room was silent for a moment. Then one of the junior Earth staffers, a young man named Owen Gale, who had been working the communications desk for 16 hours and had not slept, said very quietly to no one in particular, Did that just work? Dara turned to look at him. Not yet, she said. But we made them read it. That's the part that matters. She stepped out of the gallery. In the corridor, alone for 30 seconds before the next thing began, she stood against the wall. The wall was solid and cool, and extremely not in motion. She pressed the back of her head against it. Above her, in some rooms she could not see, the Vouth consensus was reading 62 pages of the most dangerous administrative paperwork in the history of 215 contacted civilizations. 11 of the 12 had been with her from day 18 onward. The Theresi had answered in 4 words. The Munraks had sent a weapons inventory as a handshake. The Pell had come around through tax records. The Vesser had been waiting 30 years. She had not done this alone. That mattered. That was the thing she needed to hold right now, with the wall against her back and the next phase still coming. She had not done this alone. Her earpiece crackled again.
E.
A 4th junior species just filed.
Dara.
A 4th one just went independent. She closed her eyes for 1 second, opened them, pushed off the wall, went back in. 6 months is not a long time in the life of a civilization. It is a very long time in the life of a negotiation. The Vouth consensus, as it had existed for 600 years, did not survive those 6 months intact. It did not collapse dramatically. It did not end in a war or a confrontation or any moment that would make a satisfying scene in the kind of story where things ended clearly. It fractured the way old structures fracture, slowly, then all at once, then slowly again as people sorted out what was left. 4 of the 8 junior species formally withdrew from the Consensus Resource Agreement within the first 60 days. Not to join the new compact, not yet. They withdrew to renegotiate, which was a different thing, a more complicated thing. A thing that meant they were no longer in the old arrangement, but had not yet fully stepped into the new one. They were standing in the space between 2 rooms. Dara understood that space well. The Vouth Corps responded with a second ultimatum. Harder than the first. Less administrative. More direct. They sent it to Earth specifically, because Earth was the identifiable source of the disruption. Because the paperwork had Earth's name on it. Because blame needs a place to land, and Earth was the most convenient landing pad. Dara read the second ultimatum the morning it arrived. It was longer than the first. 41 lines had become 93. The language had changed. The brackets around the livestock arrangement phrase were gone. What replaced them was not softer. She read it through once. Sat with it for a moment. She had a file on her desk from the previous evening that she had not opened yet, an intelligence report compiled by the Theresi from their 200 years of records on the Vautha's founding history. The first species they had ever brought into the consensus. What that species had looked like before. What it looked like now. She picked up the file. She put it back down. Not yet. She opened the second ultimatum instead, and began the work of responding to it because that was the next thing. And the next thing was what mattered when the other things were too large to look at directly. The response took 3 weeks. It involved Yi's team and the Munrax's weapons architects and the Theresi's administrative data and the Pell's surprisingly detailed intelligence network, which had been operating quietly for 80 years on the basis of a theological principle that translated roughly as it is not distress to understand what moves toward you. The response was not another document. It was a demonstration. Not military, something simpler and more unsettling than military, which the Vouth would have known how to categorize. It was the demonstration of a thing the Vouth had not considered possible, that 13 species who did not share a language or a biology or a history or a value system had nonetheless coordinated a complex multi-vector action across 4 sectors in 26 days, using the Vautha's own communication infrastructure. The demonstration said, "You built a network for controlling information. We used it for sharing it. Those are different things, and the difference is structural, and you cannot close it by changing the locks because we already know the building." The Vouth Corps withdrew from 2 sectors in the following month. Not a retreat. Their official communication said a strategic reallocation of resources. Dara read that phrase and felt something that was almost affection for the precision of it. She had written phrases like that herself. The language of power acknowledging a limit it would not name directly. The Compact's first formal session was held in a purpose-built orbital station above a neutral point between 3 of the member species systems. Getting there required travel methods that did not yet have standardized protocols, conducted between species who had never shared physical space, many of whom had biologies that required different atmospheres, temperatures, and sensory environments. The logistics alone had taken 2 months. Dara had done most of it from a small office in Geneva with a standing desk and a communication array that Yi's team had modified to handle 14 different signal formats simultaneously. She had not slept well in 6 months. This was not new information. The session was held. It was not smooth. Smooth was not the word that applied to 13 species trying to agree on a governance framework when their baseline assumptions about decision-making ranged from individual consensus to collective neural voting to something the Vesser did that the translation team described helplessly as structured argument until the problem solves itself. But it was held. At the end of the first session, the Theresi representative, a being composed largely of crystalline silicate who communicated in thermal pulses that the translation system rendered in a flat, quiet monotone, addressed the chamber. Dara's translator rendered it as, "We have been in the space between rooms for 200 years. We did not believe the second room existed. We are grateful to have been shown that it did." The compact's presiding officer, a bureaucratically inclined Munrax named Vrethka, who had the communication style of someone who considered most words unnecessary, looked at Dara from across the chamber. Dara was sitting in the human delegation's secondary row, not the primary row, because she was not the Secretary General or any kind of official head of anything. She was there because Colin Fairbanks had insisted on it, and because Vrethka had specifically requested her presence by a designation that translated as the one who opened the network. She was also there because he had told her she had to come and that she was not allowed to run the session communications from Geneva by herself again. Vrethka's look said, "You should say something." Dara's look back said, "I should not." Vrethka continued to look at her. She stood. She had not prepared anything. She did not believe in preparing things for moments she had not yet seen clearly, because the prepared version was always slightly wrong, shaped for an imagined version of the room rather than the actual room. She looked at the chamber. 13 species. 30-odd representatives in varying stages of presence, some via holographic relay from atmospheres that could not be replicated in the station. The Pell bioluminescent in their enclosure. The Theresi thermal and slow. The Munrax still in the particular stillness of a species whose default resting state involved a great deal of suppressed readiness. She said, "We received the letter, and we said thank you." She paused, not for effect, because that was the sentence, and she wanted to let it sit before the next one arrived. "That is what we said, because they handed us the one thing we did not have. A deadline, and a common problem. That is all Unity has ever needed. Not shared values. Not shared history, not shared biology. Just the same problem arriving at the same time, and someone willing to try for the door before the 30 days ran out."
She stopped.
She looked at the Theresi representative. "We were not fast. You waited 200 years, and we arrived on day 1 of 30. That is not something I can make right. But we are here now." The chamber was quiet, not uncomfortable. The quality of a quiet where people were thinking rather than waiting. Then Vrethka said, in the flat translated monotone that was the Munrax's equivalent of a deliberate compliment, "This is sufficient." Dara sat down. Beside her did not say anything. She passed Dara a cup of something hot that was technically coffee in the same way that orbital station air was technically atmosphere. Dara drank it. After the session, in the small berth she had been assigned on the station, she sat on the edge of the bunk and looked at the porthole. The stars outside had no name she knew. They were not the stars she had grown up under. Not the sky she associated with being a person with a history and a body and a set of years she did, or did not count. She picked up the file she had brought with her. The Theresi intelligence report, the history of the Vautha's first subjugated species. She opened it. She read it for 40 minutes. She closed it. She held it in both hands for a while. The history of an old wound that was not hers to carry was still, nonetheless, a weight when you held it. That was the thing they did not tell you. Not your wound. Still a weight. She set it on the small table. She thought about the first message she had sent through the Vautha's own network 6 months ago, in the middle of a night that had felt simultaneously like the beginning and the end of something. "We think it is a door." The Theresai had written back. "What is behind it?" She had answered. "Something better than what you have." She had believed that when she wrote it. She still believed it. Belief was not the complicated part. The complicated part was the distance between believing it and building it, which turned out to be the work of years and not of 30 days, and not of 62 pages, and not of any one thing that could be pointed to and called the moment. The compact did not have a name yet. Someone would name it eventually, probably after her. The way things got named after people who would find the naming mildly irritating. There had already been a preliminary motion in the second session, submitted by the Pell, who had strong feelings about the commemorative importance of language. She had filed an objection. It had been noted. She was reasonably certain it would be ignored. She lay back on the bunk. The station hummed around her. She thought, "We said thank you." She thought, "And now we do the harder part." She closed her eyes. She slept for the first time in 6 months. She slept without the file on the table, feeling like something unfinished. It was still unfinished, but it was open. That was enough for tonight. Preth Salon requested a private channel 3 weeks after the first formal session. Dara took the call from the same Geneva office, standing at her desk, because she never sat at her desk anymore. He asked her how she had known the junior species would fracture. She told him the truth. She had not known. She had known the offer had to be better than the existing arrangement, and she had believed that better was a low bar when the existing arrangement had been running on inertia and the fear of change for 600 years. He said, "You treated our ultimatum like a tool." She said, "I treated it like a door someone left unlocked. That was a them problem." He was silent for a long moment. Then he said something the translation system rendered as, "I understand why you did not show the fear." She did not answer that directly. She said thank you for the call. She ended it. She stood at the desk for a minute afterward. He was not wrong. She had not shown the fear because she could not afford to show it. And she could not afford to show it because she was the person who had seen the door. If she showed the fear, the door would stay closed. She had lived long enough to know that you did not get to come back and open them later. The moment passed. You went through while the moment was still present, or you spent the rest of your time explaining why you had not. She had gone through. They had all gone through. 13 civilizations standing now in the second room, looking at a space that did not yet have furniture or rules or a name. Drafty in the corners and uneven in places. Full of the particular kind of difficult work that came after the crisis and lasted longer and got less attention. This was the part she had not outlined in the memos. Not because she had not thought of it, because some things could not be planned from the outside. Some things you could only do from inside them, day by day, with cold coffee and Yi's voice on the other end of the line, and the stars outside a porthole that had no names you recognized. The years that followed were not dramatic. They were not the kind of story that made headlines. They were the quiet work of building something that had never existed before, a coalition of species who had no reason to trust each other except that they had all received the same 41-line document, and they had all chosen to believe there was a door behind it. The Theresai opened their archives. Centuries of observation, waiting, watching. They shared everything. The Munraks shared their weapons designs and, more importantly, their communication protocols, which turned out to be significantly better than anything the Vouth had been using. The Pell shared their intelligence network, which had been operating unnoticed for 80 years. And Earth shared something else. Not technology. Not strategy. Something simpler. The one thing the Vouth had never offered any of their junior partners, a seat at the table where the decisions were made. Not a seat in the gallery. Not a seat in the back. A seat at the table. The compact grew. 12 founding species became 15, then 20, then 30. Species who had been hiding from the Vouth for decades, for centuries, emerged from the dark. They came because they had heard the story, the one about the primitive species from a minor star system that had received an ultimatum and responded with paperwork. The one about the door. Preth Salon became an unlikely ally. Not officially, his position in the Vouth consensus made that impossible. But he had been there. He had seen the moment when the legal aid stopped reading and the room tilted. And he had spent the years since quietly ensuring that certain Bouth fleets were always slightly delayed, certain communications always slightly garbled, certain reinforcements always slightly out of position. He never asked for anything in return. Dara never asked why. Some questions were better left unanswered. The Compact's 10th anniversary session was held on Earth, not in Geneva. In a small room in the building where it had all begun, the same translation corridor where staffers had cried and Ambassador Leclerc had put his head between his knees. The room had been renovated. The emergency lighting had been removed. But the wall where Dara had pressed her head was still there. Vrethka presided, still using the same flat monotone that somehow conveyed deep approval. The Theresii representative, a different one now, the original having finally succumbed to the slow exhaustion of 200 years of waiting, spoke of patience and the weight of watching. The Pell representative sang a hymn of gratitude in a frequency that made the water glasses vibrate. And then Colin Fairbanks, retired now and leaning on a cane, stood and said, "I believe Ambassador Vasquez has a few words." Dara had not prepared anything. She had learned not to. She stood at the front of the room, looking at the representatives of 30 species. Some she had worked with for a decade. Some she had never met in person. All of them were here because of a choice made in a moment of crisis, a choice to treat an ultimatum as a door. She said, "When the message arrived, I read it 3 times. The 3rd time, I saw something that wasn't in the text. I saw the space behind it. The space the Vouth had never bothered to guard because they didn't think anyone would look there." She paused. "We looked. That's all we did. We looked at a locked door, and instead of accepting it was locked, we asked ourselves, who left the key under the mat? And then we looked under the mat. And the key was there. It had been there for 600 years. No one had ever checked." She looked around the room. The Vouth didn't lose, because we were stronger. They lost because they stopped being curious. They stopped asking whether the arrangement still worked for everyone in it. They stopped wondering if the door might open. She picked up her cup, coffee, cold, the same as it had always been. "So, here's my advice. Don't stop being curious. Don't stop checking under the mat. And if someone hands you an ultimatum, read it carefully. The gift might be hiding in the margins." The room was quiet. Then Vrethka said, in that flat monotone, "This is also sufficient." And everyone who understood Munrak's humor laughed, because for their species, that particular phrase in that particular tone was the closest thing they had to a standing ovation. Dara walked out of the building alone. The street was dark. The city was ordinary. The stars above were the same stars she had grown up under, but they did not feel the same anymore. They felt closer, more familiar, like neighbors you had not met yet but would eventually. Her phone buzzed. A message from E. "We did it, didn't we?" She typed back. "We're doing it. That's the thing. It never ends. The work just changes shape." Yi's response came immediately. "That's an incredibly annoying answer. Also correct. Go home. Sleep." Dara smiled. She put the phone in her pocket. She walked home under the stars that had no names she knew, but they would, eventually. Someone would name them. Probably after her. She would file an objection. It would be noted. It would be ignored. That was fine. Some doors, once opened, stayed open. That was the point. That had always been the point. She unlocked her door, went inside, made coffee, hot this time, sat down at her kitchen table, in the dark, with the stars outside the window and the hum of a galaxy slowly learning to trust itself. The work was not finished. It would never be finished. But for tonight, the door was open. That was enough. She woke before dawn, the way she always had. Not from habit anymore, from the quiet certainty that there was still work to do. The kitchen was dark. The coffee machine was old and needed replacing. She had not replaced it because she liked the way it sounded in the morning, a particular gurgle that had become the background music of her life. Her tablet had messages. 43 of them. None urgent. A different measure of time now than the one she had lived in during those 30 days. The Theresii representative wanted her opinion on a trade framework. The Munraks had sent an updated weapons inventory, less a threat assessment now, more a cultural ritual. The Pell had included a recording of their latest hymn, which the translation system insisted was about the beauty of administrative precision. She smiled at that. Answered them all. The compact had grown again. 41 species now, spread across 7 sectors. The Vouth core had not dissolved. Some structures were too old to dissolve cleanly. But it had retreated. Contracts. Pulled back to its original territories, the ones it had held before the expansion began. The junior species who had withdrawn were now full compact members, their resource allocations determined by consensus rather than decree. Preth Salon had retired. He sent her a message every few months, brief, formal, containing exactly one piece of information. The last one had said, "The old frequency is still open. No one has tried to close it." She had not replied.
She did not need to.
At 8:47, her doorbell rang. She opened it to find Ia Koffer standing on her doorstep, holding a bottle of something that was technically wine and carrying a box of pastries from the bakery down the street. "You look terrible," E said. "You look the same," Dara replied. "Come in." They sat at the kitchen table, the one where Dara had built the architecture of the compact, night after night, with cold coffee and the particular stillness of someone who had seen the door before anyone else. E poured the wine. Dara ate a pastry. The coffee machine gurgled in the background. "You never told me," E said eventually, "what you were thinking when you sent that first message. The one about the door." Dara considered the question. She had thought about that moment many times. The small comms room. The silence before she typed. The particular quality of not knowing whether she was about to save her species or start a war. "I was thinking," she said, "that we had nothing to lose. They had already decided we were livestock. You don't bargain with livestock. You don't negotiate with it. You just process it." She took a sip of wine. "The only way to stop being livestock is to stop acting like it. So I stopped." It was quiet for a moment. "That's terrifying." "No," Dara said. "It's just arithmetic. Different math than they were using, but arithmetic all the same. They counted ships. We counted doors. Turns out doors are more numerous." They sat in silence for a while. The sun rose higher. The kitchen filled with light. The compact's archives had been completed the previous year. A physical repository built on a neutral world, containing the complete history of the Vouth's expansion and the compact's response. Every message, every document, every moment of the 30 days that had changed everything. Dara had been asked to contribute a personal artifact. She had sent the coffee mug she had been holding when she read the message the first time, the one with the crack in the handle, the one she had set down very carefully when her hands were not entirely reliable. They had built a special case for it. Temperature controlled, humidity regulated. She had told them that was ridiculous. They had ignored her, the way people did now when they were naming things after her. The ceremony was next month. She was planning to attend. She was also planning to file an objection to the naming of the Vasquez trade corridor. She was reasonably certain it would be ignored. He reached across the table and took her hand. Not dramatically. The way you take the hand of someone you have known for a very long time, when words are not quite the right container for what you need to say. "What are you thinking?"
E asked.
Dara looked out the window. The city was ordinary. The sky was blue. Somewhere above, in orbit, the compact's liaison ship was preparing for its weekly diplomatic run. Somewhere further out, the Theresi were cataloging a new star system. The Munraks were updating their cultural exchange protocols. The Pell were singing hymns about administrative precision. "I'm thinking," she said, "that we should have asked for better coffee in the treaty. That stuff on the station is still terrible." E laughed.
Dara laughed too.
And the coffee machine gurgled on, indifferent to history, as coffee machines should be. The message had arrived on a Tuesday. The response had arrived on a Thursday, 62 pages long, with a clause on page for that had changed everything. And between those 2 days, in the space that had always been there but no one had ever looked at closely, someone had found a door. They had opened it. And the galaxy, slowly, carefully, one species at a time, had started walking through.
The end.